Of a Linear Circle, Part 1, Chapter 10, Grief and Patroni. By the time he gets down to dinner, Nazar has another problem. You look dour, which is often what you're accusing me of, Severus says to him when he arrives. And since you made a point of saying such to me, you're late. Nazar waves a hand at him and then sits down. At his left, Minerva is telling Phileas, Aurora, Poppy, and Dumbledore about the portraits, and her shock at how young Godric and Helga had been in 995. He ignores as much of that as he can, trying to concentrate on food while being pleased that the elves recognize his liking of tea so quickly. He isn't sure what the food on his plate happens to be, but it isn't poisonous and it has flavor other than bland. You're awfully mute this evening. Nazar glares at Severus and replies in British Sign Language, taught by several of his half-blood and muggle-born students over the years. I stopped talking and lost my voice. Fuck 7 hours of lecture time. Severus smirks at him and then shakes his head. I thought as much. He reaches into his robes and pulls out a corked flask. This might help. Nazar slugs back the entire potion before he can register the flavor. Restoratives for the throat are either teeth-aching syrups or bitter horrors. Dear gods, thank you, he says once he can feel the rawness ease. Now I can annoy people again. Proper priorities, as ever, Severus replies, amused. Priorities. Oh. Nazar stands up and leaves the faculty table, heading straight for the cluster of Gryffindors that make up their Quidditch team. I'm borrowing them, Nazar tells the others, who look baffled by his sudden appearance. Fred and George just seem amused as they're hauled away from the table by their colors. I guess we're leaving now, Fred chirps happily. Nazar takes them to the entrance hall, out of sight from the diners in the receiving, the Great Hall. He still isn't used to that name change. I thought of something. Well, that didn't take long, George says. What can we do for you, Professor Slytherin, sir? Don't overdo it, for starters, Nazar replies. I already know that you're of age, but what classes are you taking this term? Fred gives him an odd look. Light schedule, really, sir. Charms, alchemy, potions, transfiguration, herbology, and defense against the dark arts. It's just defense, Nazar says, and coughs again to finish clearing his throat as the potion finishes its work. George shrugs. Right, well, those are the classes we thought would be the most useful for our little venture, Professor, except for defense. Just defense. That we're taking because we're old enough to stand against you-know-which twit, Fred says. Nice to have the tools to do that job properly, too. All right. Normally, 7th years are actively assisting and teaching the lower years as part of their apprenticeships, but everybody went stupid, and no one does things intelligently anymore. Despite that stupidity, I need assistance. Are you still interested in that trade? Nazar asks. Fred's eyebrows rise. Well, yes, but why just us? You're the only two in that class who I can tell have the potential to do so, Nazar explains. You've never allowed a lack of teacher to stop you from learning, else you wouldn't be experimenting with what I suspect are multiple types of magic for your mysterious venture. If you come to a point where you think long years of experience are necessary, then I'm intrigued. The others might get better as the term progresses, he adds, thinking on the long day's lecture. But right now, it's you and Miss Lovegood. Lovely Loony Luna? George looks surprised. Really, Professor? Miss Lovegood is utterly fearless in a way that few ever are, especially as others are often filled with foolish bravado. She isn't. Nazar shakes his head. If it weren't for the age limit, she'd be assisting me. I have to find a boggart, because I truly believe it would be terrified of her. I've always wanted to see what happens if you terrify a boggart. George looks at his brother. Fred? George. Fred glances up at the ceiling before nodding. Yeah, fair trade. We're happy to be of service, Professor Lordship, sir. Please do not overdo it. Nazar rolls his eyes. Bring me your schedule tomorrow morning before class begins so I know when I can borrow you without interrupting your studies. I'm otherwise available from 4 to 6 o'clock every evening. Go back to dinner. The twins salute to his bemused irritation and go back to the hall. Nazar follows them, but walks past the tables to return to his seat. What in the world did you do? Minerva asks, staring at the Gryffindor table. Fred and George are grinning so widely that everybody nearby has scooted away from them in response. Corralling potential mayhem, Nazar replies. That is a good thing, yes? I suppose it depends upon how, Poppy says in dismay. Nazar smiles. I'm making them be responsible. Even Severus stares at him for saying that. How? Aurora all but wails. They're impossible. You don't browbeat talent. You direct it so it can manifest in the safest and most effective manner possible. Nazar glances at the other teachers at the table and sees far too much disbelief. Really? This is not a hard concept. I'm rather fond of it myself, Dumbledore says, and that seems to be the end of it. Nazar mutters something impolite in Old English under his breath. So far, no one except Binns knows the language, but Binns also wants to argue with him about Alba and Moray, and how Nazar is wrong about Scotland. Unfortunately, he can't strangle a fucking ghost. Severus comes to his quarters that night instead of Nazar going to his. Nazar didn't realize at the time that he was setting a nightly habit, but he isn't going to complain about it, especially when Severus brings him mead. Nazar examines the bottle in his hand, smiling. It's been a long time since I mentioned anything about this. I had time to walk to Hogsmeade before dinner, and I remembered your preferences. I do try not to overly imbibe on whiskey during the week. Severus says, Please note that I said try, as I am well aware of the fact that I often fail. Not without good reason, Nazar murmurs. The mead tastes like sweetness and wildflowers, and is just as soothing to his throat as the earlier potion. And now you've turned dour again. Severus sits down on the other side of the sofa. Why? I thought I was used to it. I thought I was used to everyone being long dead and gone, Nazar says, using his fingernail to peel up the edge of the mead's hand-printed label. But ever since Halloween, I'm not used to it. I keep expecting family to walk in that door. Sometimes I get confused when I see all this bloody ridiculous uniforms the students are wearing. The receiving hall has a different name, and is a vast space compared to what it once was. There used to be a moat around this castle, you know? Spring-fed, some of the clearest water on this entire island. It's completely gone, and I've no idea what happened to it. It's mostly the people, though. I miss them. I thought I'd gotten past it. I watched them age and die. It was so fucking long ago, but it's like I'm trying to cope with it all over again. Severus tries to start speaking several times before he succeeds. I don't know what to say to you, he says in a quiet voice. I don't have any idea what it would be like to experience such loss. I've only ever cared for two people in my life. One of them is here, the other is not. Nazar glances over at him. Only two, Severus. Severus scowls. I admit, I would be upset if certain members of this faculty were to perish, and I am fond of most of my Slytherins, though some I'd happily throttle if given the opportunity. That still isn't the same sort of loss, Nazar. No, but one does not invalidate the other. Nazar smiles and holds up the bottle. We used to make our own, twice a year. It was a challenge as to whose alcohol could make Godric fall asleep beneath the table the quickest. He built up quite a tolerance. Actually, everyone did. It was self-defense at that point. I have been head of your brother's house for 13 years, and I can all but sense the mischief that caused. Well, the challenge did have to be upheld, Nazar says. Salazar and I took apples, honey, and blaeberries, distilling a liquor from them that looked like water and tasted like sweet wine, and kicked like an ox. Once Godric was sober again, he begged all of us not to use him as a test subject for alcohol potency any longer. Bloody spoil sport. Severus laughs in near silence. I noticed that you've not mentioned Helga or Rowena. Salazar and I drank in Castile. Rowena was Bavarian, and Helga was a Viking. Godric's problem in regards to distilled alcohol is that he was trying to keep up. Nazar would be less frustrated if every single class were not a repeat of the same thing. It isn't the difficulty of the lesson, but the damned social interactions. Every year, every house, he's taught some stubborn magical beings in his life, but most of these students have dug in their heels and blatant refusal to consider that their worldview might not be correct. Nazar knows next to nothing of the modern world beyond Hogwarts, and he's still doing a better job of adjusting to new ideas. All right. You exceptionally stubborn words I cannot say because I am your teacher, Nazar says to everyone's final class that week. At least they appreciate the humor. He will charm them with bricks if he has to. His goal is still the same. He wants them bloody well to listen to him. You have homework this weekend. There is a muted chorus of groaning. Stop whining, or I'll reevaluate my stance on your essays. Nazar smiles when there is immediate silence. Better. I am going to assign each of you a partner from a house that is not your own. All of you can now cast some form of Patronus, even if it does not yet have a shape. You and your partner will agree on a time to send each other your Patronus. Your partner in mischief will write down when they saw it, identify the creature or what they heard it say, and then you'll do the same in reverse. Bring it back for your first class of next week. For those who are immediately considering cheating based on grudges or perceived house animosity, don't be stupid. I know what every student in every single year is capable of. If you lie, I will know, and you will be the one to fail this lesson. Understood? Nazar waits until he has some grudging acknowledgement from the class. Good, he says, and hands out assignments according to who seems to hate each other the most. Under normal circumstances, he wouldn't even consider doing so, as it's not the safest idea for those involved. However, he has no idea which attitudes are based on personal interactions and which are built on house rivalries, and this is an excellent way to find out. The students who truly do loathe each other will try to fail each other, even with Nazar's warning. They always think they're so sneaky, Nazar murmurs in parcel tongue. Kansa lifts her head out of his shirt collar as the students file out. You will teach them how to be sneaky in truth. If they ever pull their heads out of their backsides. Yes. Nazar fails no less than 48 students on Monday, including Draco and Ron Weasley, whose expressions fall from smug satisfaction to complete dismay when they discover that their clever schemes against each other are complete failures. Draco is angry. Weasley just seems baffled that they received equal punishments for the same stupid blunder. What if I were to tell my father of this? Draco asks after class, scowling. Nazar looks at him in disbelief. Mr. Malfoy, I would be far more concerned about your mother discovering your attempt at cheating. Your very, very poor attempt at currying favor with an instructor and being caught at either. Malfoy blanches, mutters a hasty apology, and all but flees the classroom. By the end of the day, the only class not to have anyone try something so utterly foolish and transparent is the 7th years. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for not being appallingly stupid, Nazar says to them, which garners confused looks until he mentions the number of cheating attempts. Oh, Merlin, seriously? Shaw huffs. Please tell me my house was not that stupid. Actually, it was an even split between all 4 houses, Nazar says, disappointing everyone in the room. And I'll keep failing every single last one of you ingrates until you all learn some manners. Now, did anyone manage a corporeal Patronus this weekend? Johnson got a hippocampus, Fawcett says in disgust. And not you. Well, I did get a Patronus from her, Johnson answers, glancing at Fawcett. It came to find me and everything. It's just she waited until I took out my contact lenses for the day. I couldn't see if it was a corporeal shape or not, but I did write all of that down. Sorry. Fawcett looks surprised by the apology. Oh, thank you. What is a contact lens? Nazar asks, baffled. He is even more confused when Johnson reaches into her eye and removes something transparent that rests on her finger. When he approaches, it's to see a very tiny lens resting on her fingertip. Glasses worn directly over the eyes. That's amazing. Not a magical invention. Johnson nods and puts the lens back over her eye, which is sort of alarming to witness. It's a lot easier than dealing with glasses on the Quidditch pitch. I always wanted Harry. She breaks off, biting her lip before continuing. I told Harry he should get them too, but he always said his aunt and uncle would never go for it. Nazar doesn't comment directly on her mention of Potter, if only because it looks like Spinnet might break down sobbing if he did so. Without trying to be rude, why did neither of you have your eyesight fixed? Oculus potion doesn't work on us, Johnson tries to smile. We used to commiserate over both of us being the standard exception, that we were the 2 out of our particular batch of 10. That really doesn't sound right, but this is defense, not potions, Miss Fawcett. Please try to cast your Patronus here where we can all see it. Fawcett turns red for some reason and then casts a spell. She does get a corporeal Patronus, at least. A dragonfly. Congratulations. It's so tiny, Fawcett complains. A Patronus' strength has absolutely nothing to do with its size. A Patronus is an aspect of our magic. The more confident the spell, the stronger the Patronus, Nazar says. But yours is gigantic, and there's absolutely no way for me to say anything about giant serpents without it becoming a terrible euphemism. Jordan blurts out in a rush. I've heard those implications often, Mr. Jordan. Nazar shakes his head. However, the only reason my Patronus is so sizable, he waits, smiling, for 10 teenagers to get over themselves, is merely due to the fact that an adult basilisk really is that large. That's it. The only difference is in strength between my basilisk and Miss Fawcett's dragonfly is that I've far more experience casting it. That really didn't help in avoiding the euphemisms at all, Jordan says. Nazar shrugs. Verbal defense is a part of your instruction, Mr. Jordan, and that includes being able to concentrate beyond what is said, implied, or otherwise provided as a distraction. Does anyone else have a success? George sent me a salamander, Fleet says. The regular, water-dwelling sort, but it was corporeal. George nods, proud. Got a shark from Fleet. Very impressive, corporeal, and shark-like. Why a shark? Fleet asked in dismay. Your house founder was a Viking. Why not a shark? Nazar counters. Next. Fred sent me a flaming salamander, Shaw says testily. If you hadn't lectured otherwise, sir, I'd accuse them both of pairing up on salamanders on purpose. No, I'm fairly certain that's just them. Tamsin sent me a very nice stallion with spots, Fred reports, smiling at her. Lots of galloping from that one. Nazar nods at Fairborn when she raises her hand. Parangio actually had a very nice boa constrictor, if a bit stereotypical. Another Slytherin with a serpent, Fairborn says. Nazar looks at Parangio. None of you should ever wrestle against Miss Parangio. What did Miss Fairborn send you? Parangio smiles. A parakeet. Fairborn turns around in her seat. What? I did not. A parakeet? You probably shouldn't cast dispersions if you're not paying attention, Parangio says. Exactly so. Mr. Jordan? Gupta's might finalize into a dog, but it wasn't quite there yet, Jordan reports. Jordan sent me a talking bloody Patronus, Gupta yelps. It broke my concentration. I did tell you all how to send messages by Patronus, Nazar says. What did Mr. Jordan send you? A talking ruddy hedgehog. Spinnet grins. Well, can you blame him? He's been commentating Quidditch matches for over 6 years. Talking is a habit. Oh, and I got a talking butterfly from Shaw, sir. Please tell me it wasn't quoting Alice in Wonderland. Shaw grins wide. Of course it was, sir. Nazar glanced up at the ceiling. At least it wasn't the stupid sequel. Miss Shaw. Spinnet sent me a bat, which was also quoting Alice in Wonderland, sir. Nazar pinches the bridge of his nose. Twinkle, twinkle, little bat. That would be the one, sir, Spinnet says helpfully. Stupid book, Nazar mutters. Bloody Ravenclaws. Lewis Carroll was a Ravenclaw. Shaw considers it. Okay, yes, that makes complete sense. Fawcett glares at her. Damn it, Shaw, don't sully an author of my house. Mr. Gupta, I want to see a corporeal Patronus from you tomorrow. You're almost there. Moving along. Nazar insists when Shaw and Fawcett glare at each other a minute too long. You lot are getting split into 2 teams, and you're going to spend the rest of this class period plotting how to distract each other tomorrow. Distracting each other, Appleby asks. You have to be able to cast this spell even if the world is literally ending all around you. Since we're not going to simulate the end of the world, I suggest you get creative. You can have 1 Weasley twin apiece. Finally, George says. Fred smiles. Someone who takes our talents seriously. Nazar rolls his eyes. Just don't kill anyone. His oldest students are the only bright spot for the 2nd week in a row. He spends several evenings banging his head against the desk in his office. If he doesn't break through their stubbornness, he is going to hex a lot of them into paying more attention. Nazar lifts his head as an idea occurs to him. Maybe he should anyway. Severus looks at him if he's lost his mind. You want to do what? You heard me, Nazar smiles. You don't have to like them to want them to live. You could also, think of it in terms of vengeance for the times your favorites haven't paid attention in class, creating epic disasters. All right. That is tempting, Severus admits. And I know full well you're available at 5 o'clock every evening. I can reschedule 3rd through 7th year to fall in that time slot next week. They'll all be thrilled and lulled into a false sense of joy, as their class time will be an hour shorter than normal. Severus puts down the bottle he's just finished cleaning. That just crossed the line from temptation into me looking forward to it being Monday evening. Thought it might. Nazar waits for him to finish pouring a blue-green potion into the bottle. What is that one? He asks, enjoying the sense of mint, warm fire, and lulling fragrant scents that fill the air. A safe variant of Admortentia. Nazar frowns. There is no such thing as a safe love potion. At this point, it is no longer truly a love potion. It has the characteristic of amortentia that allows one to be able to detect the odors associated with whom they love. But that is all it does. In fact, ingesting it would be unwise unless you needed a reason to be ill for 6 hours. It's called spiritum veritatis. Breath of truth, Nazar translates. One of yours. Severus nods. Too many Death Eaters asked me for amortentia. I wasn't about to give them any such thing, so I compromised and gave them regret in a bottle. It now sells well to those who only wish to be handed a significant clue as to where their affection lies. In short, it sells very well to fools. Some people are simply not that self-aware, Severus. Oh, Nazar snaps his fingers. I've been forgetting to ask all week. Do you have a copy of the Oculus potion lying about? Someone mentioned it not working on 2 out of every 10 individuals, and I wanted to see it. A moment. Severus goes to his desk and returns with a copy of the NAWT level potions text. Page 156. Oh, annotated. Lovely. Nazar says, trying to read the original formula through Severus' handwriting. You know it's wrong, too. I just couldn't fix it. Can you? Nazar stares at the page. I know this. I just can't remember it. You may borrow it if you like, Severus offers, until you recall what it is you're searching for. Nazar glances at him. I'm sure there are other copies aside from what I know is your own. Yes, and they're wrong, Severus immediately retorts, which makes Nazar laugh. Severus waits until Nazar departs by apparition before he lets out the breath it feels like he's been holding since Nazar asked about Spiritum Veritatis. He didn't lie about its properties, but he didn't tell Nazar that he'd just finished brewing it. The potion is still affecting the immediate environment. Nazar mentioned nothing about unusual scents, which is telling. Severus hadn't meant the potion's brewing to be any sort of test. He didn't plan to have a visitor in his office that evening at all. He wasn't planning on testing himself, either. He'd simply prepared a cauldron's worth to give to the shops in Hogsmeade, as he usually did in November so it would age in time for the rush of idiots, only motivated by the 14th of February. He hadn't expected to be struck so quite forcefully with smells he'd come to associate with Nazar. The faint scent of warm lavender that lingers on his clothing, or the hints of sandalwood and sunlight Severus experienced the night Nazar fell asleep on his sofa. And what are you going to do with that information? Severus asks himself caustically. He has no idea how to court someone who is literally almost 1,000 years older than he is. He still isn't quite sure if Nazar would even welcome such a thing. For all Severus knows, the man is an incorrigible flirt who is desperately out of practice. Severus awakens early on Sunday morning, walks out of his bedroom, and stops short when he notices the basilisk Patronus curled up on his sitting room floor. It's too early for this. That must be the signal the Patronus is waiting for. It rears up and regards him with unblinking eyes before speaking in Nazar's voice. Can I borrow your classroom? I'd kill whoever stole my cauldron, but they're dead already. He sighs and gets out his wand. Tell Nazar he has my permission, please, he says after casting the spell, and the doe leaps to the wall to deliver the message. It's answered less than a minute later by the return of the basilisk. She's absolutely gorgeous, Severus. Thank you. Severus calls for a house elf and requests the strongest tea it's possible to brew without killing anyone. He isn't leaving his quarters without true fortification. An hour later, he thinks he's ready to dare his classroom to find out what a 1,000-year-old Slytherin has wrought. He sees to several students on his way out of the dungeon, and promptly gives detention to a Gryffindor for swearing in the hallway. Karume looks to be on the verge of mutiny before Black, Ginevra, and Colin Creevey drag him away. At least 3 of the 4 are intelligent, especially as Ginevra slapped her hand over Karume's mouth to keep him from voicing any further blunders. Severus enters his classroom to the scent of stewing mandrake, which always leaves a pungent green bitterness in the air. Please tell me that Kanza did not petrify a student. I noticed you're more concerned with the students than the teachers. Nazar is sitting cross-legged on top of a workbench, his chin resting on his hands as he stares at the two cauldrons that are set up on the bench next to him. One brass and one cast iron, both of them holding a glass stirring rod. They can bloody well take care of themselves. A magic restorative requires only one cauldron, not two. What are you doing? I realized something obvious last night regarding the Oculus potion. We didn't have turmeric. Well, we had it later, once we began taking the old road on a regular basis, but not at first. I don't think turmeric is a failing, but it is a shortcut. And by resorting to a shortcut, it reduced the effectiveness of the original potion. Severus can see that occurring and becoming accepted as common, while brewers ignored the loss of potency. What was the original? Rosemary, eyebright, and dried blaeberries. The berries are more useful for more than alcohol, though they only have a magical use when combined with unicorn horn, odd damned plant. They're called bilberries in England. Severus says, I'm used to hearing blaeberries from anyone except Minerva and their local-born students. Good for you lot from the south. They were blaeberries first, after the Gaels adopted the Norse term. Nazar hops down from the table, conjures a handful of ice without using his wand, and drops it in the brass cauldron. He gestures for the potion to stir itself before glancing at Severus. Sometimes all it takes is one simple realization, and the pieces fall into place. So I see. Severus tilts his head at Nazar's clothes, which he was wearing the previous evening. I have non-addictive sleeping draughts. Nazar smiles. I'm a chronic insomniac, Severus, but I appreciate the offer. He tilts his head as he regards the brass cauldron before he starts ladling in stewed mandrake, which is surprisingly green. You do not brew by color. When Severus brews, color is only part of knowing when a potion is correct. He's just not used to seeing others employ the same method. Color instructions in a potion are largely useless to me. Orange and yellow are rather obvious, but blue-green, pink, white, clear. Nazar shakes his head. I don't see those colors the same way other people do. I brew by listening. When the ladle scrapes the bottom of the cast iron cauldron, Nazar extinguishes the heat for both of them. There. That'd be the Oculus potion that works for everyone, though we called it Sana Visio. Healthy vision. Severus peers into the cauldron, which reveals a potion that has a golden-orange hue with a hint of violet at the edges. Different. Use the mandrake leaves, too. They're just as useful as the root, Nazar says. Why not? Indeed. Severus steps back and tries not to glare at the cauldron. Not once did I consider replacing the turmeric, and I should have. The potion is old, and that is an Indian root. To be fair, we did have it after the year. Nazar trails off. Never mind. I can't remember. We had it at some damned point, anyway. Severus looks at Nazar. And this is correct. It's safe to use. You know the answer to that, Nazar says, walking to the clean flasks and bottles lining the shelf. I wonder if Miss Johnson is awake. I need a willing test subject. Severus is surprised by that. Miss Johnson of Gryffindor has eye trouble. Nazar nods. She wears non-magical lenses, contact lenses, she called them. The standard Oculus potion didn't work on her. This one will. If she isn't immediately available, ask Minerva, Severus suggests. She is not fond of her deteriorating vision. One cannot wear glasses as a cat. Nazar bottles a single flask of the potion and looks at it through the glass. To me, this looks like a sunset would to you. Beautiful. What does an actual sunset look like, then? Severus asks. Nazar lowers the flask. Amazing, he whispers. There are no names for what I can see. Would a pensive translate it? I don't need a pensive, Nazar says after a moment. You're a mind magic practitioner, Severus. I can show you. Ah. Severus tries to ignore the uncomfortable feeling that statement brings. That is... Nazar smiles. I trust you not to pry beyond that, Severus. His smile fades. You just cannot ever try to gain access to my mind unless I've given you permission. I assume you have a formidable defense. My first layer of defense is difficult for someone to get through, but not impossible. My second layer of defense is literally lethal, Nazar says. That is why I warn people like Dumbledore not to pry when they make the attempt. Literally lethal, Severus repeats, intrigued. What is it? A basilisk's unlidded gaze. Severus stares at him. And how in God's name did you recreate that? Mandrake restorative and a patient basilisk who was willing to allow me to experiment looking into her eyes while I used a mirror. Salazar assisted, told me I was insane, and then did the same thing. Nazar explains. It was an interesting week. Your brother was correct, Severus says. Curiosity drives me to ask what it is like to be petrified. Nazar purses his lips in thought before answering. Unexpected conscious napping. You're not truly awake, but you're aware of what's going on around you. It isn't entirely unpleasant, but I wouldn't want to be trapped that way. Severus thinks of how long the first petrified student lingered in the infirmary after Slytherin's maddened basilisk was released. No, that sounds nightmarish. Nazar starts laughing. You want to try it, don't you? I am not fond of the idea of being petrified. I am, however, very fond of my privacy, and that is an effective way of maintaining it, Severus replies. If Voldemort ever slipped through your first layer of defense, he would definitely be suspicious as to how you managed to create that second layer, Nazar says. Severus smiles. He would be a bit busy dealing with death, I think. Nazar shakes his head. Severus, if the killing curse doesn't work on him, a basilisk's unlidded stare will probably be nothing more than a temporary inconvenience. Kanza, stop volunteering to help. I do not actually want him to do this. Severus watches as the infant basilisk glides out to rest on Nazar's shoulder. She is opinionated, isn't she? Yes, Nazar sighs. Fine. If this is something you decide you truly want, we'll help you, but it will have to wait. There aren't any mature mandrakes in the greenhouses. Minerva is already awake for the day, which is one difficulty dealt with. The other difficulty lies in convincing her to try the potion in the first place. I'm really not sure. Oculus potion has never worked on me before, Minerva says, though I admit it is pretty. This isn't Oculus potion, this is Sonovisio. Nazar holds up the flask and then scowls when Minerva hesitates. Fine. He uncorks it and drinks half of the flask's contents before sealing the bottle again. Then he blinks a few times in surprise. Oh, my vision had deteriorated a bit. That's better. All right. I'm convinced. Minerva held out her hand. I don't expect it to work, though. Less than 2 minutes later, Minerva is taking off her glasses in shock. I am eating those words, and I don't care. Nazar, I apologize for doubting you. I haven't been able to see this well since I worked for the ministry. You're welcome. Nazar finished bottling the rest of the potion before he cleans up both workbenches and cauldrons. I'm glad it worked. Severus glances at Minerva, who is already looking at him. You should publish it, he suggests. That would be a very short book. Nazar picks up a bottle full of preserved caterpillars. Where are these from? Australia, Severus answers. And lemon ball, you idiot. Nazar puts the bottle back. That is still a very short book. But I do seem to recall Albus saying something about your need to establish yourself beyond the borders of the school, Minerva says. That man speaks too much of all the wrong things, Nazar mutters. What about the book you gave me? Severus asks. Did you ever discern who wrote it? Nazar glances at him. Yes, but I had to look at the original copy first. That's Salazar's work. Severus feels his eye twitch. What? Oh, that's delightful, Minerva smiles at Nazar, while Severus glares at her. What's in it? Healing potions, poisons, 2 different delousing formulas because anyone of Nordic descent is allergic to the first, and many other miscellaneous ideas crafted because someone would tell Salazar it couldn't be done. He'd tell them off, do it anyway, and then tell them off again. Nazar gives Severus a curious look when Severus shifts his glare to him. What? When did you remember who wrote that book? Severus asks, giving Minerva a suspicious glance. Oh, the day after I gave it to you, Nazar says. Severus resists the urge to grind his teeth. Why didn't you tell me? Nazar smiles. Because you didn't ask? And you didn't think it important? Well, yes, but I was waiting for you to ask so I would get to see the face you made in response, Nazar replies, which is when Minerva loses control and starts laughing. Severus narrows his eyes. I truly hate both of you right now. Oh, so you don't want to keep the book? Nazar asks. The innocent expression on his face would be more effective if his eyes didn't give it away. I didn't say that. Severus scowls at Minerva. Get out of my office. Minerva gasps for breath, nods, and leaves while still chortling at him. God damn it. I told you that you were friends, Nazar says. If you don't at least write down the original formula, I will beat you to death with a cauldron. The Tsar lifts a second bottle of Sanovisio. I'll consider it, maybe, he adds, but disapparates before Severus can consider making good on his threat.